Hey guys, welcome back. This is Greg Beast. I'm here with Peyton Smith, FOA Carolina director, crushing it down south. How you doing today, brother?
Doing good. Excited. Thank you for having me on. Ready to talk about some action. Should be
Yeah, man.
good.
We brought in the all-time legend, MAAC faceoff man, Peyton Smith, rewrote all the records to come in and talk about a conference that nobody knows more about than him. We can look down the line here. I think when we look at the heavy hitters, ACC, Jerry and I talked about probably being the most dense as far as faceoff talent from top to bottom of rosters. The Big Ten has some real big heavy hitters. The Big East is a lot of guys that have talent that are kind of unproven and younger. And now we go on to the MAAC here, where we got a whole bunch of schools that are looking for the guy. And I think you can provide some insight. So let's start with Canisius. What do you think about what their plan is going to be with the new rules, the new referee lineup, et cetera?
Yeah, I think with a lot of the MAAC schools, sometimes it's been a revolving door. But I think there's been a few schools, including Canisius. I've kind of had that main guy. They had a guy, Daniel. I always butcher his last name. I think it's Bollager. But he was their main guy since I was a freshman. We graduated together. He opted out of come back for his fifth year. So that definitely leaves a big hole for them. But I think definitely they have Connor Beals, who's pretty good.
I'm interested a lot. I'm interested in Beals. Beals is a transfer, right, from Hartford Community College.
Yep. Yeah. So
73% guy.
Things from him. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually had an old high school teammate who played at Hartford Community College and heard really good things about him. So it'll be interesting to see him coming in, fighting for a start there. But yeah, a lot of unknowns at Canisius, especially with Daniel, who took the bulk of their reps. I mean, he probably graduated with 700-800 reps under his belt. With him heading out, definitely a big hole to fill for them.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see how you have the changeover now, 73%. And we always say, we want you to know how good this guy was last year, but it's the caveat of new rules. And once again, if you haven't seen our others, if you didn't watch last weekend, the refs are standing 5 feet back, 5 yards back. The refs are standing at the midline, and there's a ref behind, and they're set, whistle, all back here, no physical set cadence. We've seen rolling, we've seen leaning, we've seen some kind of weak lineups. So it all depends on who's going to adapt. I think adaptability of all years is more important this year than ever. So, people might scoff at, oh, he's a transfer from Hartford Community College. People don't understand. If you're not in it right now, you don't get how competitive every level of face-off athlete is at every division right now. We talk about the 2012 when FOA came out. There used to be like 4 or 5 guys that just murdered everybody in college lacrosse. And then all of a sudden, you had this many elite level face-off guys for this many schools. Now we coach how many thousands of elite level talented face-off guys a year, but there's still the same amount of D1 programs. So D2, D3, and the JUCOs they all have a good guy. So don't scoff at a kid coming from Hartford. He could come in and he could crush it.
Yeah, and then also Dylan McNally, I think he has the most game experience. He took 65 as a freshman, and he's a junior this year, so didn't really get to take that much last year. Maybe he'll step into that role, but yeah, definitely gonna be interesting to see Canisius for sure.
Yeah. So we go to the Detroit Mercy, a guy you're probably very familiar with.
Yep.
Jarzembowski, 2-time second team. He was 60% last time. I'm sure he couldn't wait for Peyton Smith to just graduate so it could be his show in the MAAC. How do you see him switching over to the SNG rules?
Yeah, Alex Jars is awesome. I think he has just naturally very quick hands, extremely athletic. He's a big kid. He's got to be at least 190. I'm very interested. I know he's an extremely hard worker. Some guys on Marist are friends with him from back home. I think he's extremely talented, and I think he'll fit right back into his role as being a top guy in the MAAC. I'm not sure about the rest of the depth on that team, but they do have a very good LSM, very scrappy wings, and they was always a very competitive battle. Great. So I would definitely expect Alex Jars as one of the top guys in the conference for sure.
Awesome. We move to Manhattan now. They have some talented freshmen that I wanted to focus on who are coming in. Devin Roy and Fraser, they're coming in. One kid's from Philly, one's from Arizona. When you look at Manhattan, who lost some vets over this past year, we just touched on an LSM usage, and we talked a little bit about it with Big East Talk with Trevor yesterday. Could Manhattan be one of the programs, because there's a couple here in the MAAC, that could utilize a long pole regularly in practice so that they have an effective LSM, because they have athletic poles.
Yeah, definitely. And I actually know one of the poles pretty well, Rob Johnson from Bayport, Long Island. I think that he could definitely get in the mix as well. But again, Manhattan's been one of those schools that's been a revolving door. I think they had Nick Galiotto for a few years who, took a decent bulk of reps. But for the most part, I don't think I ever played Manhattan one time where it was one consistent guy through the whole game. I think they have a lot of guys that like to mix in. So hopefully one of these freshmen or incoming guys can, like seamlessly transition into stand up and be a big role player. But it'll be interesting to see. I think some of these schools are still trying to figure it out early in the season, and in practice will definitely utilize the pole and see if they can, figure out an opportunity to win some faceoffs there.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I touched on with Jerry and with Trevor, it's never been a better time to be an LSM faceoff man.
Yeah, exactly.
The problem is if you haven't done it in practice and the coaches expect you to be good out there, it's a whole different ball game. So,
exactly.
All right, let's talk about a school you may have heard of, Marist.
Yeah.
People who don't know, Peyton owns every Marist faceoff record. Tell me about our boy Andrew Evans and what we can look forward to. Do you think it's his time to shine this year?
Yeah, I definitely do. Me and Andrew are extremely close. He paid his dues. I mean, he, had spent a lot of time behind me at Marist for the past 3 years. But he has a relentless work ethic, and he's been doing stand-up for a long time. You go look at his high school tape from Quinnipiac High School. I mean, he's been doing SNG for a very, very long time. But I think he was really raw, and I think that spending time with you and even spending a little bit of time with me, perfecting his stance, his first initial movement off the whistle, and kind of his mechanics is going to set him up for a lot of success. But I remember I called him. As soon as the rule change happened, first person I called was Andrew Evans. I was like, hey, man, rule just changed, only SNG, no more knee. And he was like, you got to be kidding me. And he was extremely excited. So he's not one of those guys that was like, hey, this sucks. He was extremely happy, and I think this is going to be an opportunity he can capitalize on. And then as well, they have John Kelly, who's a freshman that came in from Virginia, extremely athletic, big kid. So I think they'll have a lot of options there, but I think Andrew is going to be another one of those guys in the country you haven't heard about that could make a splash, not only in the MAAC, but I think he could do very well nationally as well.
And I love the fact that Andrew was one of those guys who always worked on SNG, because we always preached it with the FOA, right? Knee down, moto grip, and standing neutral grip. Work on both. So you're seeing that pay off for a lot of guys who listened, and Andrew was one of them. What I'm interested to see now is, as we're work with Andrew a little bit in the off season, and there's two different types of SNG. There's the SNG where you look at it the way we used to face off against knee down guys, and then there's the SNG going against other SNG. People who don't know at home, standing neutral grip. So when you look at that style of face off, you want to be a little bit more of a 45-degree angle. You don't want to be as sideways. And Andrew was very sideways, which worked great against moto grip because you could slide under and pull. So I'm interested to see, if he can make that turn all the way to the 45-degree mark so he has more power. The one thing that I want to see guys do is, who's going to be the guy in the MAAC who's going to go in and out real quick with true plungers and then transitional counters? Are the guys going to lock up and spin and rotate like it's knee down? If Andrew comes in and uses the true plunger that I've seen Andrew use, he could light that whole conference on fire.
Yeah, definitely. And I think he can. And I think he can also just win a lot of ground balls and counter work too. I remember when he would go SNG against me on my knee, it was insane in practice and made me better because, he was just on me at all times. So definitely very excited to look at him. And also just for years to come, with Kevin Radman and Dylan Bedell coming in the next couple of years, Marist is going to be set up for the future for sure.
One of our favorite pipelines for FOA for sure. Guys like yourself loved playing there. So that hopefully will continue.
Definitely.
Now we look at Monmouth. Monmouth has some questions at this position. They got 3 guys here. How do you pronounce his name? Souter?
Yeah, I think Souter. Yeah, Matt Souter.
Yeah, Souter. So, he's the returning main guy, and he had a pretty solid freshman campaign on a knee. Weinberg, big athletic guy. And then you have somebody who I don't think anybody knows about, but could be an X factor, is Colin Bozak. Now, Colin Bozak is a grad player who played at Haverford School in Philly, and was part of like a three-headed monster approach when they had three stud face-off guys. And Colin was a really awesome stand-up face-off guy. Yep. He always has been. That's been his go-to. That's what he's best at. I haven't seen him in a while, but I'm going to assume that if he hasn't lost a step, that he could be a difference maker for these guys.
Yeah, definitely. I think I played against Colin when he was at St. John's. We did a couple scrimmages against each other, and then, it was honestly a couple of years ago. I mean, nobody was going stand up. I think he was one of the only guys who was only never went on his knee, was only stand up. And I think that's one of the reasons why he wanted to come back. I think he's a 5th or 6th year. He's going to be at Monmouth. So I think throwing him in the mix. I mean, I think both those guys, Sauter and Weinberg, who've been there for a little bit, are definitely going to have some competition in practice. So it'll be interesting to see who they throw out there for the first faceoff. But I would highly expect more of a rotating cast of crew to begin with, and see who's going to be that top guy. One of the things with the MAAC is I don't think they're starting for a little bit later in these other conferences. So they're not going to have a lot of time to try things out. They have to get their stuff together pretty quickly. Monmouth has options, which is great.
Okay. Yeah, it'll be interesting. And I think this is one of those options where we talked about in the past with some of these breakdowns, the teams that are going to have a second guy to go to who is a definitive change up from the first guy are probably going to be the most successful units this year. The teams that have a starter who has fast hands, a backup who has a little bit slower hands, and then a freshman who has the slowest hands, that's going to be the kind of team that's just going to get pumped every weekend. Yeah. I'd be interested to see if Sauter or Weinberg, I'd love to see Weinberg as a counter first guy. I think counter first for Weinberg as a defensive rake into a reverse shovel or shovel counter guy, I think with his size could be a definitive problem for people to face, especially if you have a hand speed guy as your starter.
Yeah, definitely. I could definitely think that Weinberg I think he should go that route. And I think that for a lot of face-off guys, if you don't get that initial start, whether it be your hand speed or for whatever reason, you definitely should focus on counters or other things to make yourself more of a complete player to get time on the field. And coaches should recognize that.
Yeah, I think when we look at Quinnipiac, they have George, who was 61% last year, and they have Jared Davis, who's super athletic sophomore, and they have Kay, who saw less action but was also a 60% guy last year. In that shortened season, those are the numbers that we have. But based on what you know about this roster, who do you think is going to take the majority of the draws?
Yeah, I would say definitely, from my experience, Dimitri George. He made MAAC all rookie his freshman year. I think he was close 60%, if not above it, his freshman year and last year in the shortened season. But he was him and Jars were the two hardest guys I ever played in the MAAC for sure. Dimitri has one of the things I'm really looking to see is he's a very short punch. He never swung his left hand at all when he was on his knee. And I think some of the guys transitioned to S&G still have this issue of swinging their left hand way too much upfield. And I think Dimitri is not going to have that problem at all. I think he's going to snap right over the ball. He's extremely athletic. I think he's going to be able to do a lot of things. But I think just from a technique standpoint, Dimitri is going to be the easiest transition to the starting face to S&G. So I'm expecting him to have another big year. And I know he's hungry because he had a lot of success his freshman year. Didn't get to show it off last year, and now he's going to be able to show it off this year. So I think he'll have a good year.
Yeah, and that's awesome insight. I think you talk about being hungry. We as face-off guys understand what it's like, whether it's an injury or whatever could happen, to cut your season short. I would definitely bet on Dimitri George coming back, chomping at the bit to make an impact. Definitely. So let's talk about Sienna. I've had experience with Dylan Pape. He's the sophomore. He was super talented Long Island guy. I haven't seen him this offseason as far as facing off S&G. Who else on that roster should we be looking out for?
Yeah, I mean, their main guy, and again, they're one of those teams that's kind of had a revolving door a little bit over the past 4 or 5 years. But I think Jason Zhao, who took a lot of the reps, the past 2 years, I think he's going to be in the mix. But again, it's just going to be, how much work he put in to transition to S&G. And it's going to be apparent. We're going to see this spring with not only the MAAC, but all conferences through all levels, who's put the work in, who hasn't, and the correct work and with the correct mechanic. So Jason's out. He's an athletic kid, and he has, pretty naturally quick hands, but is that going to transition well And is he just going to be a one-trick pony and just try to go forward every single time?
Yeah.
I think for Sienna, I think they should really work on having somebody who's great at counters, especially with Jars and Drew Evans and Dimitri. If they're not winning the top sidewall battle, they have to have another option. And if they don't, it may be another year again where they go under 40%.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that they definitely need to have in their back pocket going against the best of the MAAC.
Yeah, it was interesting when we talked about the rule change. We know what was said publicly, but what was really talked about a lot was we need to get rid of 70% face-off guys.
Yeah.
And I said, not only are you not going to get rid of 70% face-off guys with SNG, you're also going to allow those 70% face-off guys to pump in like 15 goals this year. And Ashton Wood on the first face-off of the year was like, exactly. And scored in 5 seconds for Mercer. But there you go, right? They didn't win that game. Ashton was 18 for 19 on face-offs and they lost. So I didn't hear the anti-face-off crowd very loud after that game. But the reason I bring that up is because now you talked about two different styles of guys that are going to be out there this year. You're going to have the guys who, and when we say put in work, we don't mean you're not practicing, right? Some guys will be like, oh, just because whatever, I'm not working hard. Yeah, we understand you're working hard, but there's two styles, and you're going to see them. We're going to see the contrast. There's the guys who are doing this because they're looking at it like knee down, who have never faced off SNG before. They're the ones who are going to roll their wrist, swing their left hand, lock up for 50-50, and then rotate and try to saw down on the ball. And then you're going to have the guys who are studied and understand the nuance of SNG, and they're the ones who are going to have their vertical wrist when they line up, and they're going to shoot in, pull out, and then if they have the ball, they go. If not, they transition into a counter. And it's going to look quick and very fun to watch and dynamic, as opposed to the guys that are just going to be lost. Now, the guys who are lost, they're going to battle each other, and one guy's going to win faceoffs. When they go against guys who are studied, it's going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
just be aware of that, because if I go against Peyton Smith on knee down faceoffs and I happen to be late to the whistle or my mechanics are off, I lose a clamp. SNG, if my mechanics are off on the whistle, I get beat for a 4-on-3. And that's where we're going to see the guys up here compared to the guys a little bit lower. So let's finish up here. Let's talk about St. Bonaventure. Now, St. Bonaventure, the Bonnies it was a shortened season last year, but no one on their roster who took more than 10 faceoffs last year was above 28%. So if you're St. Bonaventure, I'm looking at their roster this morning and I'm thinking, this is a team where you can see either a freshman coming in and making a difference or rotating an LSM through that's hungry. We were talking yesterday on the Big East one, me and Trevor were racking our brains. It was Tyler Narr. Narr was the face-off guy we were trying to think of, who was at Georgetown and was phenomenal. And could St. Bonaventure go that route in this season, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, they got to try something a little different. And I think they just have to pay more attention, to the position. I think when we played St. Bonaventure, I mean, it was just rotate 3 different guys, kind of just whatever. Extremely Canadian heavy team. So I think maybe some of these guys have taken, Canadian box face-offs or something of that nature. But I think they need to have definitely an LSM presence, because against guys who don't know how to exit well, an LSM is going to be a nightmare. And especially some of these guys in the MAAC who aren't as proficient and kind of just still feeling out the whole SNG, mechanics. If you can't exit well, Poles are going to have that opportunity, if they're coached correctly, to win a lot of face-offs back. So again, if St. Bonaventure's going against somebody like, Jars or Evans or whoever, they need to have somebody that can, at the very least, do counters and disrupt. So I definitely think they should have that in their rotation moving forward. But we'll see. I mean, they may have some new freshmen we don't know about who would come in and kill it. So that's just kind of the way the season's going, for sure.
Yeah, that's why this is so fun, to be honest. I know it's not fun for the kids who are involved, but I'm excited in 3-4 weeks to come on here and talk about a kid that no one's ever heard of doing really well and describing the film and why he's doing so well. Because I think people sometimes get a little stagnant with the same names all the time, and they're always looking for the next guy. So you're probably going to see him, somebody putting up numbers like Ashton Wood did for Mercer. So if we have to pick 2 guys that you think have a shot at all conference, who do you pick?
It's tough. I mean, I think by far, in a way, the top three are going to be Andrew Evans, Alex Stars from Detroit, and Dimitri George from Quinnipiac. I think there's a ton of potential for Dimitri George. I think that he's going to get one of those spots. I think just the way he faced up is going to be a lot easier for him to translate up to S&G. And to be honest, it's really tough. It's a toss-up, but I think Andrew Evans is going to be one of those two spots as well, just because he's a complete package. I think he can do a lot of great things, not only with his top sideball movements, break variations, but his counters and his athleticism are insane. And I think that also with the wing play of Roselle there, one of the best LSMs in the conference, I think that they'll have a spot at the two. But again, with Jarl, I just don't know how he's transitioned to S&G. But we'll see. I mean, it's going to be very interesting. But I think those three are for sure conference as of now, in my opinion, and then we'll see how it goes. But it's going to be really good to watch.
Cool. Yeah, I think I mean, I have to agree with you, and I'm deferring a little bit more to your expertise in this conference. I think that if Andrew Evans sticks with speed in and out and not getting in the lockups, I think he could have a hell of a season.
Yeah.
One that really turns heads. If he stays in the lockups, he allows himself to be more human, and I think he brings himself down. But yeah, I would agree. I think this is an opportunity for him to be an all-conference selection. As far as George and Jars, it's a kind of a toss-up, like you said. At the end of the day, there's so many variables. That's what makes this kind of fun to guess, because one, in order to be all-conference, you have to be basically taking 80 or 90% of the face-offs. So if you're going with a two-headed monster approach from an all-conference perspective, it's not great and ideal. But those guys all seem like they're going to be getting the brunt of the reps. So it'll be interesting to see how this whole thing shapes up. Once again, the referees aren't going to be up to the line. There's going to be super fast whistles sometimes. There's going to be whistles that are held by different officials. Who knows what they're going to be doing with the leaning. So hopefully it gets all cleaned up. But this was an awesome time sitting there talking to you about the MAAC. I think, we wish these guys all the best. Is there anything you want to say when we sign off here?
Yeah, I mean, good luck. I mean, I'm already missing it a little bit. I know definitely, I know the boys at Marist going to kill it, but it's going to be great to watch. One of the things, too, I wanted to add is that I think most of the MAAC teams, not all of them, are only going to play a MAAC conference. So some of these teams are going to play 2, maybe even 3 times going into that tournament. So I'm really interested to see between those 1, 2, or 3 games, how the teams correct from the first game, adjust, things like that. I think in this type of season, that's going to be interesting to watch as those matchups keep going. But no, I'm excited to watch. MAAC's fun. If you guys who are watching this video haven't seen it, definitely tune into some games. Definitely some good competition there for sure.
Awesome. All right, guys. Hey, have a good one. The next one will be about the American East. We're excited to keep bringing you these breakdowns. YouTube.com/Greg Gurenlian. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and share this with your friends. And we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah.